Well, hello there, you lovely little squids. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you may be in the world. Hello, welcome to another episode of Yami Noob. Thanks so much for being here. Today I wanted to take a deeper dive onto Yamaha's motorcycle lineup. I did a video like this recently for Suzuki's lineup just because I was kind of fed up with seeing what Suzuki was producing and putting out in the world. And so I wanted to make a video today talking a little bit about Yamaha's lineup, why I think they're killing it, a couple things they could change, and why I think they make so much sense right now in the motorcycling world and everything that they are doing. But before we continue, just wanted to shout out that we are giving away a ton of cool motorcycles here on Yami Noob. If you click the link down below to yaminoob.co, you can find out how to win a Ducati Panigale V2, a Harley Davidson Sportster, and 5 other beginner giveaway bikes. We've got an SV650, an MT-03, and 2 Honda Groms. So if you want to sign up and join our community, get access to our Discord server, all kinds of cool stuff, hit that link below and join up. Without further ado, let's get into Yamaha's lineup. So for starters, before I dive into all the different models of Yamaha, I wanted to say that I think they're doing a really good job of being a full line manufacturer. So what do we mean when we say full line? It means that they have a bike for everyone and anyone, all the way from little kid trail bikes to older folks who maybe want something more relaxed and comfortable for the street. It would be difficult for you to walk into a Yamaha dealership and not find a bike that would probably fit your needs and what kind of toy or vehicle you are looking for. So I think they're doing a really good job there. I think Yamaha also has a very cohesive brand and identity, which is really important. I think of someone like Honda or a brand like Honda, and they're kind of all over the place, but I feel like Yamaha is very distinct and they know exactly what they're going for. The naked bike has the whole dark side of Japan thing. The sport bikes have all the heritage and pedigree of racing in pretty much every category. They've got off-road racing, so they're very involved in motorsports and very involved in all kinds of motorcycle racing, and so I think they're doing a really good job there. But let's go over some of the models here. All right, the first couple models I want to break down are the bread and butter of Yamaha. It's the MT line. I think they're doing a really good job here. They have a clear step-up progression of where you should start and where you should end up with these MT bikes. You start off in the bottom of the range with the MT-03. It's their little baby naked based on the R3 platform, 321cc parallel twin engine, makes about 43 horsepower, A2 compliant. Very cool motorcycle, and the best part about it is it is priced super aggressively. So the MT-03 is a great offering, but I've got a couple recommendations for Yamaha at the end of this video that I'm going to talk about. The next one on the list is, of course, everyone's favorite and the very much lauded and kind of game-changing MT-07. So the MT-07 is starting to look a little long in the tooth. I'm going to talk about that later in this video as well, but the MT-07 is still one of Yamaha's rock-solid, best-selling motorcycles. I think they've sold over 80,000 of these units since they've released them. And to give you guys an idea, Ducati sells about 50,000 motorcycles every year throughout their entire range. So with one bike, Yamaha has sold more than Ducati sells in a year. So it kind of gives you a sense of scale of how much bigger the big four are over some of the European manufacturers, right? Like someone like Honda or Yamaha, they move so many bikes, and they move a lot of bikes that we don't really talk about or think about here in the United States as well. They got small displacement bikes like the 125s, 200s, all kinds of different bikes that are designed for tax and licensing restrictions in different countries. So honestly, I believe it's Yamaha is selling very well in Pakistan, and then Honda sells really well in India. But there's obviously sales happening in both countries, but that's a huge market for them because I mean, those countries literally have hundreds of millions of people. India has over 1 billion people, so a lot of units being sold in those countries. But the MT-07 is still a rock-solid bike, really great. If you look also as well at the MT-09, right? The MT-09 is a great motorcycle, also priced very aggressively for the market, and it's one of the few triple-cylinder sort of motardy kind of bikes that you can buy. The ethos behind the MT-09 was for it to be this street motard with a big, stonking, powerful, torquey triple-cylinder. And it kind of blew everyone's doors off back in 2014 when Yamaha came out with this thing, and they've just been kind of knocking it out of the park ever since. The newest version is updated with the new lights and all that, so it looks a lot better and it competes super, super well in this category. As you can see here, it starts at $9,000 on the showroom floor. That is a very amenable price for a super fun motorcycle. And then last in the naked range is, of course, everyone's favorite. I think it's everyone's favorite anyways, it's my favorite, the MT-10. Based on the R1, same frame and chassis, the engine's detuned a little bit. It gets the cross-plane growl. It's an awesome, awesome bike. We recently did a comparison video with the R1 and the MT-10, and it was a lot of fun to see and compare and contrast. The MT-10's mid-range is absolutely brutal. It is so rapid, such a great motorcycle. And so I think Yamaha's done a great job of making a naked bike lineup that has such a clear progression for the entry-level rider or even the more experienced rider. Let's look at their sport bikes now, shall we? Let's. Similar story here, but with less granularity because there's no triple cylinder sport bike in Yamaha's lineup, but they kind of reflect the MT range as well. So you have the YZF R3, which is the bike I started out with riding. Then you have the R6, which is the same as it's been since 2008, basically, with a couple refresh and changes here and there, but it's basically the same frame and engine from way back in 2008. But honestly, that bike was damn near perfect, so if it ain't broke, don't fix it, right? But I'm glad to see that they updated it a little bit and didn't just leave it languishing by the wayside. And then, of course, you have the R1, which was recently updated for 2020 to meet Euro 5 compliance. Now makes 200 horsepower on the dot with emissions restrictions, so that thing's probably pumping out close to 207, 210 kind of horsepower numbers, and it's still a flagship, amazing superbike. They also will sell you happily the R1M, which is the limited edition, super exclusive R1 with the semi-active Öhlins and all kinds of cool stuff. The sport bike range, I think, is also one of Yamaha's bread and butter. But sport bikes are not really selling the way they used to in days past, and so Yamaha has very clearly not drawn a ton of attention and a ton of development into these bikes except for the R1. The R3 was recently updated, but it's been the same since 2015 as well. They pulled a bit of a clever trick and changed a couple things here and there, a bit of a version 1.5 for the R3. The R6 has been the same since forever, and then the R1 really gets all the love. So sport bike line looking really, really good. On Yamaha's website, they also feature here what they call the Sport Heritage model, which is kind of a mishmash of different bikes. So you have the XSR line, which is literally just the MT line, but in a bit of a nicer suit. They look a little more retro and cool, but they ride exactly the same. You also have the Bolt and the Bolt R spec. The Bolt is kind of like Yamaha's answer to the Sportster. I've got a couple recommendations for the Bolt for Yamaha at the end of this video, so stick around for that. And then the VMAX is still being sold, which is kind of crazy. I thought they discontinued it, but still out there championing the muscle cruiser flag, although I do have some qualms about the VMAX. I think that in the day and age of the Rocket 3, the Diavel, some of these really bonkers muscle cruisers, the VMAX is starting to look a little tame, which is really saying something because the VMAX is absolutely crazy. But I don't really think this is a super big leader in terms of sales for Yamaha, so I don't think they really care to update it very much, but we are seeing the resurgence of the muscle cruiser lineup. Things like the Rocket 3 have come out. The VMAX is a lot cheaper than the Rocket 3, so you still get those thrills and all that kind of stuff from this muscle cruiser at a more affordable price, which is cool. Now, there's a lot to say about Yamaha's Adventure lineup. Compared to BMW or KTM, Yamaha doesn't have anywhere near the amount of granularity of Adventure-style motorcycles that those brands have. KTM's got the 390 Adventure, the 790 Adventure, the 1290 Adventure. BMW's got the middleweight Adventure, the 800, the 850, the 900. I don't know if they make the 900 right now in the ADV market. They make the 1200 GS. So it's weird that Yamaha doesn't have that same kind of granularity. I think it would behoove them to make a MT-03 Adventure. Why not? I think KTM's doing a decent job with their little adventure bike. But the one thing they've done super, super well is they've focused on core competencies, right? So the Tenere 700 is this darling of a middleweight ADV bike right now. Everyone's talking about it. Everyone's super excited about it. It's simple, lightweight, easy to maneuver. It's what an adventure bike should be, in my opinion. It can tour, it can go around the world, it can still get really nasty on some trails. If you're a capable rider, you can absolutely take the Tenere 700 and have a great time with it on your favorite light single track and trail conditions. So Tenere 700 is a knockout bike in my opinion, and it really spoke to the fact that Yamaha was like, you know what? We're gonna make a simple motorcycle that works really, really well, but is updated and is new, and all the fundamentals have been breathed upon, as opposed to just slapping a crazy dash on it and rider modes and all this other stuff. They focused on the good stuff. Now, they also make the Super Tenere. The Super Tenere has been recently updated, but I literally can barely find any information about this bike. People are just really not talking about the Super Tenere very much, although it is priced to compete with something like the GS 1200, the Multistrada, the KTM Adventure 1290, the 1290 Adventure. No one's really talking about the Super Tenere. Africa Twin, right? Because to me, the Super Tenere is basically like some Africa Twin that no one is really thinking about. You know, it still has a big stonking parallel twin, very similar to the Africa Twin. Lots of electronics, lots of rider aids, all the touring comfort you could want. Apparently it's a good bike, but I have not heard anything about it, and I don't know enough about it to talk about it, so we're gonna leave it at that. For all the sport touring boys out there looking at the Versys 650 and all that kinds of stuff, Yamaha right now does not make, in the North American market anyways, a middleweight sport touring option. I believe in the EU and in Australia they offer the Tracer 700 that's based on the MT-07, but for here in America, on this American website that I'm seeing on here, I'm not seeing the Tracer 700, which is a bummer because I think that would be a pretty stellar motorcycle for the sport touring market, something a little bit punchier than the Versys 650. And everyone always sings the praises of the Versys 650, so why not get in the fight there a little bit, Yamaha? That would be pretty cool. But for the sport touring models, you got the flagship FJR 1300. That's looking a little bit long in the tooth. I know that FJR owners are absolutely head over heels with their motorcycles. They really, really love them, but it is starting to look a little bit long in the tooth for my taste. You have the Nikon, which they classify as a sport touring bike, which is kind of hilarious. If you live under a rock or you don't know, Nikon is Yamaha's three-wheeled experimental motorcycle. It's so cool that they made this. It's so weird and bonkers, and I love seeing brands take risks like this. It's really, really cool. And then you have the Tracer 900, which is basically an MT-09 and a sport touring package, which is pretty sweet if you ask me. Leading us up in the Transcontinental Touring models, as Yamaha calls it, which is I don't know if that's a defined category, but this is basically Yamaha's big bagger, cruiser, big touring bike type of thing. This is designed to compete with the likes of the Harley-Davidson CVO, those sorts of big bagger bikes that you'd take on super long distances, big twin type of thing. So you have the Star Eluder and the Star Venture. I've seen these in person a couple times at different dealerships, and they are so big. They literally look like battleships just kind of gliding down the road. Not really my preferred taste of motorcycle, and I don't know enough about the touring model to really dive into whether or not the Star is working or not, but I do think it's very, very difficult to capture the die-hard Harley-Davidson CVO, big touring bagger type of guy into the Yamaha ethos and brand. But the Star looks like it's doing the right thing for those people who like those kinds of bikes. It's a bit of a Goldwing competitor, a bit of a CVO competitor. Got the big fat fairings in the front, big super premium, radio and leather seats and all that kind of stuff. If you're into this, definitely check it out from Yamaha. Pretty interesting motorcycle. The last on my discussion for today is Yamaha's dual sport offerings, which I think are very, very cool. The WR250R has been around since about 2008 in this current iteration, and it still works really, really well. I think the WR makes the strongest case for the everyday usable dual sport that's going to be super reliable and run really, really well. The WR250 has valve interval services every 22,000 miles, so you can buy this thing and ride it for probably a year or two, like every day, and not worry about valves or maintenance or anything like that. So it's a dead simple motorcycle to own and maintain. I think the WR is a knockout bike. I do wish they would update it slightly for the next couple of years, but I kind of feel like the WR250 is going to end up like the XR650 over at Honda, just kind of languishing in the background, not updated for years and years and years. And then you also have the XT250, which is sort of a simpler, even smaller dual sport that's got a lower seat height, not as aggressive as something like the WR, and it's a great bike to just poodle around town with, and a really great bike to just chuck down your favorite trail. And then you have the venerable TW200. Yamaha's weird little farm bike, tractor bike type of thing with the big stonking tire at the rear. The TW200 is a really interesting little bike, and I think it's pretty great. Now, I'm not going to discuss Yamaha's off-road competition models, their motocross or cross-country or trail bikes, mostly because although I do own a KTM 250SXF myself, and I do a little bit of off-roading here and there, I'm not super knowledgeable on whether or not Yamaha's off-road offerings are competitive enough or interesting enough in the current lineup. I know the KTM pretty much wipes the floor with everybody, so I will leave it at that. So overall, Yamaha's doing a very, very good job with their motorcycles, I think, but I have a couple of recommendations that I think could absolutely make them just like #1 out of all the big four. So the first thing I think they could do is bump up the displacement on the MT03/R3 platforms. We are slowly seeing everybody creep towards this 400cc category, while increasing torque and reducing power a little bit. The MT03 and R3 platforms are known for their very zingy, rev-happy kind of engines, which makes them super fun and playful. If you put a system on an MT03 or a R3, you get a really nice sound out of it. You get to rev it out to like 12.5 grand. It's super awesome, but you know, most of the offerings now are moving towards that 400cc mark, so I think Yamaha might start wanting to think about making a Ninja 400 competitor that is truly on the money, but they may not have to. Maybe the R3 serves a good function of where it's at right now. I think that Yamaha could do a better job in branding and promoting their flagship ADV. That is a big growing segment right now. The adventure market in general is very hot, very in fashion, one would say. And I think Yamaha should start looking at that segment and start thinking about, okay, should we make a small displacement ADV bike? Should we make the Super Tenere, you know, really get it out there, really show people that it competes with the likes of the Africa Twin, the KTM 1290, all those kinds of motorcycles, and try to capture a little bit more of that adventure market, maybe segment out a couple different Tenere 700 options, maybe make a very off-road rally-focused edition of the Tenere 700. I think people really like that kind of segmentation, which is pretty cool. So maybe start thinking about that. And then the other thing I'd love to see is to update the MT07 Yamaha. It's been 6 years. Everybody's starting to slowly creep up on you and slowly start leaving you in the dust. The MT07 is still a very good motorcycle. The fundamentals are still there. It's still a super fun bike to ride, but I think it's about time we see a TFT display on it, maybe some different rider modes, maybe some new features and technology in that motorcycle to keep it up to date with the likes of the Z650 and the SV650. But to be honest, the big reason I think they need to update it is because the price they are asking for it on showroom floors is close to $8,000, and for the features and benefits you get from that motorcycle, I don't think it makes a lot of sense for that price. So if Yamaha still wants to command that sort of price for the MT07, I would say to update it a little bit here and there. Just make it, you know, in line with the rest of the MT line of bikes. Give it the LED lights, give it a TFT dash, upgrade it a little bit, maybe give it a new refreshed look, maybe fix some things that people didn't like about the bike, you know, just that kind of stuff, and I think you'd have a pretty solid motorcycle. The last recommendation I would like to see from Yamaha is make a small displacement cruiser. Compete with something like the Rebel 500, the Rebel 300s. Right now, the only cruiser the Yamaha does is the Bolt, and they've said that they're moving out of the cruiser market because Harley-Davidson customers are just too difficult to attract over to a big four brand. But I think it would make a lot of sense to take the MT07 engine and put it in the cruiser and compete with the Vulcan, compete with the Rebels, and get in that small parallel twin cruiser market. I think that could be pretty cool. So those are my recommendations and suggestions for the folks over at Yamaha. If anyone over at Yamaha is listening to me, thanks so much for watching all the way to the end of the video. I appreciate it. I am a very die-hard Yamaha guy. I like Yamaha bikes quite a bit. I've owned several of them, and I do very much like them. Even though I currently don't own any Yamahas myself personally because I'm afflicted with Euro snobbery as a disease and most of my bikes are European at this point, but I still have a huge soft spot for most Yamaha bikes, and yeah, that's it. Hey, thanks for watching the video. Why don't you click this one right over here and you can keep watching some more of your sweet Papa Yam. Maybe this one will have fun memes in it. Maybe it'll be interesting. Maybe I crash a motorcycle. Who can say? Maybe you should click and find out.